Hello my dear sewing friends, it's Alisa here, and I don't think I will be wrong if I say that most of us have probably experienced that very moment when a sewing machine decides to chew up our fabric. And as an icing on a cake, usually it happens when we're just about to start a new seam, which can be a total bummer. So in this video, I really wanted to share with you some of my favorite ways how to prevent chewing up of the fabric and have a really nice and smooth start to your project. As always, these are tips and techniques that work really well for me that you often see in my videos because I do use them in my day-to-day sewing, which of course is my hope for you as well. And they're going to be in no particular order. So let's get going with this first one, which is to use a starter. Basically, it's just a little piece of fabric, usually a scrap, that I use to start the seam. I place it underneath my presser foot, and I usually start halfway through this little starter, so that way I don't have to worry about my sewing machine chewing up anything else. Then I start stitching. Once I get to the bottom of my starter, I place the actual garment or the actual project underneath my presser foot, and I continue stitching. This little starter also helps to serve as a little handle in order to be able to direct your fabric underneath your presser foot. Now you have probably noticed that I didn't do any back stitching here, which you can of course do without a problem. Now on some fabrics you might choose not to do any back stitching, and if that is the case, what I do in that situation is I simply snip off a little bit of my starter fabric, and then I take my pin, I undo the stitches until the beginning of my actual project, and then I tie the ends in a knot. Now the starter method works really well for me on all three of the machines, so try it on a sewing machine, try it on a serger, try it on a cover stitch machine, but I think where I use it the most is when I hem slightly lighter fabrics on my cover stitch machine. It does provide a really nice smooth start and a really clean hem. Now this next method you see me use often when I do a rolled hem either on my serger or on a sewing machine, and the idea here is very straightforward and very similar to the first one. You want to create something that you can use in order to guide your fabric and to help it move underneath the presser foot. So you want to grab your fabric and also a hand sewing needle and thread. Then you want to insert it right at the very top where your seam is going to start, like so. Here I place the fabric underneath the presser foot, and using the thread that I have inserted at the very top, I guide the fabric as I start stitching. Now this is what it will look when it's all done. If you are interested on how to do this little tiny hem on a sewing machine, then I will leave a video with really useful tips, tricks, and hacks on zigzag stitch in the description. Now, as you know, we're working with a variety of different fabrics when it comes to sewing, right? And as much as I love this previous method, it doesn't always work well for knits because the last thing that you want is to stretch out your knit as you sew, and therefore it will end up with waves. So in order to get your really smooth start to the seam and avoid chewing up of the fabric, you just need to put something underneath in order to make your fabric slightly sturdier at the very beginning. For that, I like to use my tracing paper that I use for drafting my patterns, or you can also use a little piece of wash away stabilizer. Simply put a little piece underneath the fabric at the very beginning and then start stitching. Once you're done, all you have to do is tear it away and just make sure that the little bits of paper aren't stuck in the seam. And here you might like the wash away stabilizer a little bit more because then you don't have to worry about it at all. As you wash your garment, it's going to disappear. Now if you have noticed, sometimes we tend to get a little fabric jam or a little chewing up of the fabric right as we do the back stitch. So here are a few little steps in order to avoid that. Place your fabric underneath your presser foot, and instead of starting at the very top, we're going to start a little bit lower. Then instead of going straight, we're actually going to go in reverse. Once I reach the top, I release the reverse button and I continue stitching as if I was to do a simple seam. And once you're done, this is what you're going to have. From here, simply pull the threads to one of the sides and then tie them in knots. Now, if your sewing machine doesn't have a reverse stitch, or perhaps you're just not having much success with it, here's what you can do instead. Start with flipping your project upside down, and from here we will complete all the same steps. So start stitching with a straight stitch all the way to the bottom. Then leave your needle inside of your project, lift up the presser foot, pivot the entire project in the correct direction, and continue stitching the entire seam. As you can see, the result will be identical. Now, after all of this, from my personal experience, the best tip that I have is that sewing jams and chewed up fabric can happen for a variety of reasons, and before doing any of those, usually what I do is I check the needle to make sure that it's not dull and it doesn't have any small burrs in it. Then of course I double check that the size of the needle and the type of the needle is appropriate for the fabric that I'm working with. And after that, don't forget that the stitch settings will matter as well. I find that sewing machine manuals actually have a ton of information about that, so don't disregard them. There are a wealth of information. With that being said, I'm sure there are some other useful tips and tricks, and perhaps you might have one or two up your sleeve as well. So if you do, and if you would like to share with us, please let us know in the comments below. Now, if you would like to know how to master beautiful hems on your garments and all the different types of hems, then click on this video right over here, step-by-step instructions with examples. I can't wait to see you there, and until next time, happy, thoughtful sewing. I'll see you very soon in another video. Bye!